want to thank everybody. I am Travis Keys. I am chairman of American Photographic Artists New York. APA's mission is to advocate, educate, and elevate the professional photographic community. So we're excited to have you here. We're here, as a community to support each other, and that's the most important thing we've been doing nowadays. Is share information, get out there, and really support one another in this. It's a hard day and age. Photography is, there's never been more photographers or pictures taken on any single day than every day that's new now created. So APA is here to really support you and professional photographers, to give you the right tools for success. And one of those things is we now have the 2022 APA Awards. Call for entries is now going. It's our annual competition. It's open to all photographers at any level worldwide, and everybody can from emerging to established photographers can submit at apanational.org, and that's one of our wonderful awards that we do every year. Next Tuesday, we have a little known photographer live at SVA Theater, Annie Leibovitz, and we'll be discussing her new book, Wonderland. So if you have not gotten your tickets, we still have some tickets and books available, and you can get them at ny.apanational.org and find tickets there. Deb, hi, how are you? Deb is one of my right hand at putting all these together. I know you got a bunch that's happening with newsletters and stuff like that. Why don't you say hello?
Hey, everybody. Thank you all for coming. And for any of you who are new to APA, maybe you saw us in the PBS newsletter or someplace else. We want to welcome you and let you know that we have a twice a month newsletter that is free. And if you'd like to subscribe, I'll put a link in the chat for you to send me an email and subscribe. And also note the link there for the APA Awards. There's also a discount code that gets you $20 off the entry. And one thing we just also wanted to say before we get started is Nivi's here representing School of Visual Arts Continuing Education. And this has been a really crazy and fun speaker series. We started in February, and this is the end of the season. They say in show business, start big and bigger. So we started with Nick Brandt and Platon, and we had Sean Lee and Deanne Fitzmaurice and Phil Penman. And we're ending here tonight this season, our first season, with Sam Abell, the legend. And we would thank SVA for being part of this first season of our speaker series, this magical mystery tour. Awesome.
Hey, Nivea, how are you doing today? I want to thank SVA for all this, because the School of Continuing Ed is such a great place, no matter what skill level or what interest you have, to really kind of jump in and really pursue those passions. And why don't you give us a little hello and a little spiel about SVA?
Hi, everybody. Yes, continuing education at School of Visual Arts. Our semester starting up, summer semester, so we have some really cool new courses coming up. And if I'll put the link in the chat here, we have fashion photography coming up and how to make a photo book, just to name a few, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so I'll put the link in the chat. And yeah, and we have some in-person and online courses available.
Fantastic.
It's good to be here and really excited to hear Sam.
It's been such a great series, and I want to thank you so much for all you guys. And Sam, I want to say hello to you. It's one of these rare things that we have someone that has spanned the amount of time in the professional photography industry. And it's such a wonderful thing to have you here tonight, because no matter what level, I think you're an inspiration. The way you give back, the way you see photography is, and the way you explain it is very different than, there's a lot of photographers out there right now. And to understand what you do and why you do it and how you became who you are is an important thing. And I think it's, one of those things we all need to realize before we become the levels of photographers that we all want to grow into. And I want to thank you for being here tonight, and say hello.
Thank you, Travis. Deborah, thank you for your many messages, your steadfast communication with me, and I am very happy to be invited and very happy to be here. Happy that this night has arrived. I've been looking forward to it. And I'm going to jump right in by saying that I come from a humble place in life and in photography. I came from a town in Northwest Ohio, the so-called lost corner of Ohio, very flat countryside, and that flatness, that level landscape, that horizon line, and that palette, which I would call gray, white and black, have influenced my photography. So first thing I would like participants tonight to think about is where they came from and what their influences were. My parents were high school teachers, and my dad's life became so much bigger and better for him and for everybody around him when he got a new hobby. He became a photographer, an amateur photographer. He photographed weddings on the weekend, and I helped him. I also helped him in our basement darkroom. I got photography, or he got photography magazines, 3 a month, and I learned photography from those magazines and from him. He took a workshop. I have taught workshops since the mid-1970s. I think I would not have done any of this if he hadn't gotten a new hobby in the mid-1950s when I was 10 years old. So I credit my father with teaching me photography, but I will start at the very beginning with a question that I put to my dad. Daddy, where do photographs come from? At the age of 10, I thought they might come from the camera or luck or maybe possibly money. My dad said, no, photographs are built. This is a book I did 20 years ago. It's called The Life of a Photograph. What I'm interested in tonight and talking about is what gives life to a photograph. As Travis said, there's a billion new photographs made each day, and most of them will wither immediately. They have a very brief life. But some photographs last, some photographs endure. Those are the kinds of photographs I was interested in making. I show you this not to promote the book. You can get it on Amazon as a used book. I'm not selling anything tonight. I'm presenting ideas and thoughts. But if you are curious about the thoughts in this talk, there is this book out there on Amazon as a used book. I have none and am not promoting it unless you're interested in what you hear tonight. One of the things that you would see in that book is 120 photographs. But I'm only going to show this one from that book. I put it in the book because it's taken and not made. I was on a payphone in Davenport, Iowa, when I heard an unearthly sound. I whirled around and saw that the train was coming off the tracks. Down the tracks, the cars were toppling and the corn was covering the ground and anything on the ground. And if the cars continued to topple, that taxi cab would be crushed by the car and smothered by the corn. That didn't happen, but I didn't know it then. This is uncomposed, unweighted upon, unlit. I have not paid attention to the color, the graphics, the texture, the volume of space, the composition, the moment, nothing. This is a grab shot, and it's the only one in that book. And it's there to illustrate contrast, because every other photograph in the book is made. This is my dad, who taught me photography. My first love in photography and my longest, most ardent love is for black and white. I also love snapshots. I've been a lifelong snap shooter. I do it because I believe in the power and the integrity, you might say, of snapshot, their honesty. I also do it in black and white still today, because I believe black and white is classical and enduring. So honesty and endurance. Make a black and white photograph like this, and you will think they do have stopped time. but I'm older now than my dad was then. My dad and I went on photographic outings, and I would ask him, where do photographs come from? And he said, photographs are built. You compose the picture, and then you wait. You wait for it to come alive. I made this photograph when I was 14. It won the smallest prize in the National High School Photo Contest in 1960. And I was incredibly thrilled by that achievement and honor. This is a very fine example of what my dad learned in his workshop he took, not taught, he took it. And when he came home, he would tell me what he learned. Everything that I remember about what he taught me is in this picture. Sammy, compose the picture and wait. Well, what does that mean? I kind of understood the compose part. He said, look for strong graphics. Keep the sun to your side or to your back. Take a low angle for more impact. Remember, bad weather makes good pictures. And above all, compose the picture and wait. What did I compose on? I composed on the strong graphics, the strong diagonal that he talked about. And there was a second diagonal of the train. And there was the bad weather. There was the structure of the rest of the train station. And because my dad stressed building, I gave the picture a foundation. So much for the composition. What about the waiting? Once I'd locked in all of those elements, I waited. Two things happened. My dad buttoned his coat, and the train, in a cloud of steam, left the station. Click. The part that's left out is all important. It's where I begin my photographs. It's the back layer. And the back layer is the clear, cold winter day of Northern Ohio. It's so clear and so cold and so blue that I don't have to pay attention to it. I disregard it. There's one thing my dad didn't tell me. It's very big in my life. And that is the space between the back of his coat and the edge of the train station. This space. I've lived with this picture for more than 50 years, but I only look at that space. It gives to my dad's coat an elegant line. So there's composition and there's micro composition. And if you were in a workshop of mine, you would hear a lot about micro composition in your work and in my work. My dad didn't mention that. It's something I learned about on my own. What I'm interested in, and what I'm interested in you being interested in, what I'm going to call inevitable photographs. What's an inevitable photograph? You just saw one. My dad looking at a train leaving the station. It looks like it has to exist. But does it? Is it inevitable? Or does it just seem inevitable? Here's a photograph I made on assignment for National Geographic 40 years after my dad told me to compose the picture and wait. There's a lot of structure in this photograph, a lot of posts and poles, lights, gondolas. A great deal of the picture is static, just as static as that train station in Ohio. And I'm composing with that in mind. I'm locking down everything that's not moving, and I'm locking in the exposure, and the focus. My camera's on a tripod, and I'm waiting for this situation to evolve. And the reason is, I think it has potential. And that's what stops me in life, in the world, in my career. I allow myself, I've kind of trained myself to view the world for its potential, its photographic potential. And this is rich in potential, but a lot of things have to happen. Bear in mind that nothing that's fixed in this photograph will move. And now turn your attention to the right-hand side. To the right of that light post, passengers which have just gotten out of the gondola must clear out. And they do. And now turn your attention to the gondolier who's bringing the canopy up to cover the front of his boat. He's covering the contents of the front of his boat with a tarp. You know, the thing about him is he doesn't have to change much. He's pretty good, but he does. He gets better. What does better mean? It means that his gesture is more classic. It's more humanly recognizable as an ordinary, eloquent human gesture. It's small, but photographs are often made of small elements that work right, that get better. And now we're going to look at the left of the photograph, and a lot has to happen here. Number one, that ferry boat has to clear out in the background. And when it does, it will liberate the entire back layer of this photograph. Even more important, the gondolier's girlfriend needs to stand up and clear out. She needs to micro-compose herself for my benefit. She and the post that's blocking her have to come unlocked. They have to clarify. They have to articulate. So the post is a post and she is a person. And she does. Now there's one more thing. It's very important. It's this gondolier. He's left off his passengers, and now he's leaving. And now he is the only thing that I'm looking at. He needs to be micro-composed. He needs to become his own small photograph, completely composed, and that means micro-composed. And he does. He constitutes his own small photograph. If you were in a workshop of mine, which you kind of are tonight, I would ask you to engage with the world, allow the world to stop you, allow the physical world to stop you because it has potential for you. It speaks to you, like this spoke to me, like the train station spoke to me. You would engage with that subject or that situation. And the next day in the workshop, you would show your first picture, which this is. And then you would show your best picture because of what you did, how you waited, where you moved. Did you get closer, back up, get higher, get lower, change lenses? Did you devote 10 minutes to it? Were you patient? What did you bring to the situation to clarify it? What did you micro-compose to make it better? And so you would show your second picture to illustrate what you had done. I was stopped by potential. I was patient. I was attentive. The situation clarified itself. And when it did, I was ready. I composed and waited. The very important thing is to get everything out of the way of the moment as soon and as surely as you can. Compose. Intensely compose and patiently wait. This is a snapshot taken on a lake in Maine. It's the 4th of July. I've put out on the dock a cake of rockets, 20 cakes, light one fuse, step back, and in sequence, 20 rockets will go vertically into the air, just like that. And the first 19 went straight up into the air, and I steadily photographed them. But the 20th came toward me. You cannot lift up your camera and make this photograph. The camera has to be at your eye. Compose this picture, Sammy, and wait. Wait for what? Wait for the woman in Venice to stand up and look at the scene. Wait for the train to leave the station. Wait for the rocket to come toward you. And when it explodes, make the picture. This photograph changed my life because it was on my first assignment for National Geographic. I was confused at the time. I certainly didn't feel like a National Geographic photographer. I felt more like a newspaper photographer, which I'd been, or a teacher, which I'd been, or a student, which I'd been. I was carrying the enormous weight of responsibility to bring home photographs of Newfoundland, Canada, that were worthy of publication. And where did they come from? When the art director laid out this story at National Geographic, he said, "Sam, this is going to be the lead photograph." I said, "Why?" And he said, "It's iconic." And I said, "What does iconic mean?" He says, and he held up his hands like this. And he said, "Sam, this photograph could be on a billboard, or it could be a postage stamp. It's that strong graphically, and it's eloquent about a way of life." Well, that's what I wanted to photograph: ways of life, culture, how people lived on Earth. When people see this photograph, they think surely I was looking at the primary figure. And I can't say that I wasn't. Of course, I was aware of this figure. I was in the boat with him. He loomed over me. He loomed large in the viewfinder and in the composition. The photograph in many ways is about him. Well, this is the son of the man that I was actually looking at. I was looking at his father. And I wasn't looking at his father's boat. I was looking at him. He needed to do something for me. The world needed to meet me halfway. I wanted him above that horizon line. That's the horizon line of Ohio, the horizon line that I'd grown up on, looking at every day. And I knew if you wanted to give stature and standing and status to a person, they had to be above the horizon line. And in this sequence of photographs, keep your eye on the father in the background. I have 4 of them. It's what's happening on the back layer that counts. It happened once. The photograph is now regarded as a classic of a North Atlantic lifestyle that no longer exists. The fish that they were fishing for, cod, they cannot fish for now. The stock has been exhausted. no one goes out indoors. Photograph was published, as I said, in the Geographic as the lead picture. And this man whose face you see on the right had his life changed by seeing this. It came in the mail to his farm in Nebraska, where he was sick and an invalid, and he wasn't in school. He was isolated by his sickness. This magazine came, he turned the page, saw this photograph, and had his life changed. He's a professor of photography now in Nebraska. Photographs can and have changed lives. My life has been changed by seeing photographs in print. As a photographer out in the world, looking to clarify cultures, I often mostly encountered scenes like this, scenes of disarray, visual chaos, overlapping elements, junk in the background. This is a common scene of life. People who have seen my work and not heard me give talks think, well, the world just unfolded for me. The gondola got in the right place, the train left the station, the rocket came toward me. No, this is how life looked to me most of the time. I was so discouraged by this scene that I left the branding. I went to a diner in rural Montana and had lunch. I read a magazine. I got guilty because I departed from the branding, the chaotic, unpromising branding. And then I came back. And while I was away, I saw that a group of cowboys had broken away. Now there was promise. What is that promise made of? That promise is made of the background, the back layer. Think of your photographs as canvases, blank canvases. Upon those canvases, you will seek and find life. So no to the left, yes to the right, based on the background, the sky and the open prairie. I took up a position in front of the cowboy, wearing the cowboy hat and a tan jacket. And there was a reason. And from that position, right across the calf from him, I did not move. It didn't matter what happened elsewhere. I composed my picture. I think of situations, whether it's a gondola or a train or cowboys, as problems to be solved. Interesting problems, cunning problems, difficult problems, problems in the best sense of the word. And I've taken a powerful step in the direction of solving this problem by taking up my stance where I did. The photograph was later named one of the 50 greatest photographs ever made at National Geographic. And the brief answer about why that is so is photographers know and editors know that it's difficult to hold multiple narratives together in one composition. But there are about 4 narratives here being held together. I'm showing you the original slide for 2 reasons. One, you don't get to see original slides very often. Number 2, I want you to know, and here I illustrate it, that all my life I've been a full frame photographer. No cropping, no post-production, straight photography, where every problem is solved in the viewfinder at the time that the photograph is made, not afterwards. A carpenter friend of mine made a puzzle for me as a gift of this photograph. I show it to you now to illustrate the sequence of my thinking. I started with the gray sky, the back layer. Where it joins the clean open prairie was very important to me. That's the horizon line of Ohio and the line that defines my work. The sky and the prairie meet at only four places, but that is enough to give you a sense of depth and infinity. I concentrated on the cowboy because he had the knife in his mouth. With the cowboy came the calf that was being castrated. And with the calf came his partner who's holding the calf down. Into the middle ground came two other cowboys dogging a calf to the ground, which will also be branded. The cowboy that brought the calf to the middle ground is shown. And the last thing, the final thing that I'm looking at is not the sky or the prairie or the cowboys or the calves or the man on the horse. I'm not looking at any of them. They are committed. What I'm looking at is the red bucket, which is leaving the composition. In a complex photograph, in a complex composition, at the end of it, you can only be looking at one thing. That's why you compose the photograph and wait. You get everything out of the way so that you can concentrate on the all-important moment. In this case, it was the red bucket, but it could have been the train, and it could have been the father in the dory rising for a moment above the horizon line. It could have been the rocket that came toward me. In each case, I was prepared for the unexpected, all-important moment. This is a branding that I left. This is a branding that had no promise, and then it did. There's a lot to look at in the photograph, but I only look at one element. The cowboy on the back layer. If he does not rise head, shoulder, and horse above the horizon line, this photograph would never be seen. I would never have showed it. Run that horizon line through the head of the horse or the body of the cowboy, and you will crush this photograph and kill the composition. From that cowboy, the whole composition proceeds and recedes. You go from the front to the back or the back to the front. How it started, how it ended. First, best. What did I do? I identified the potential which resided in the sky and the prairie. Upon that canvas, the photograph takes place. 16 years separate these photographs. I would say to you that the photograph on the right is an elaboration and a complexification of the photograph on the left. They are, to me, the same photograph, and they succeed for the same reason. So setting comes first in my photography. See the situation, compose it, wait. It's even true in still lifes. I teach a class at the University of Virginia called Deep Seeing for Executives, where I try to convey to them what I've learned in photography that could help them. Most photographers see the subject, and the subject is the magazine that's on the table. They don't see anything else. They see today's agenda, today's menu, today's work. I didn't mind this photograph. I took it, I would say, for emotional reasons. It wasn't for publication. I took it because I liked it, but I made 3 mistakes. Digital photography has allowed me to look on the back of my camera and see my mistakes. One of them is at the top. The elements on the left are the same as the elements on the right. They just aren't arranged well on the left. So it's a tighter, cleaner, stronger top. And this is pretty important. The reason I liked this scene was the oval, almost platinum glass tabletop. But on the left, I've composed it poorly. On the right, it's micro-composed. Like the top of the window, it's cleaner and therefore stronger. But the real mistake is that I didn't start on the left by clarifying the landscape on the back layer. 3 mistakes, 3 corrections. How it started, how it ended. First, best. 3 versions of micro composition. It's 6 in the morning. I'm in my hotel room in Moscow. I walk over to the window on a day off, a Sunday, after 3 weeks of straight hard work, when I was completely surrounded by Russians, guiding, supervising, and shadowing me. But today, I have a day off. I walk to the window and I see the Red Square and the Kremlin and the cathedral and the empty plaza. I also see pears that my wife has bought in the black market. I take the picture and I make a Polaroid. I look at the Polaroid and I like what I see. And I say to myself, I'm just going to photograph this today on my day off. I'm reading a book. I'm together with my wife. I'm just going to photograph this. And the first thing I do is remove the curtain. Buses arrived, and so do people, and I micro-compose the people. And then I make my first mistake. I turn what is an all-out horizontal situation into a vertical. But I micro-compose the spire of the Kremlin into the folds of the curtain, and I wait for the man to complete the composition. So compose and wait for the wrong photograph. And then I make an even more grievous mistake. I turn the Kremlin, the cathedral, and the museum and Red Square itself into pavement, buses, and the tops and hoods of cars and trucks. Why did I do this? I did it to bring into the composition the horizontal line that defines my work. It's the top of that slab of concrete that constitutes the windowsill. It's destructive. It's almost nihilistic. It's useless, but it's there. And it just shows the power that the horizon line has in my work. And then I make another grievous mistake. I'm now using the horizon line to block out the pavement, trucks, and cars. And that's good. But I'm using the wrong lens. I'm using an ultra wide angle lens, which gigantically, grossly, wrongly, greatly enlarges the size of the pears and shrinks the Kremlin. But that horizon line has allowed me to unlock this composition. I back the camera up. And now I'm not looking at the pears, the Kremlin, the cathedral, the museum. I'm not looking at the windowsill, the window frame. I'm only looking at the back layer, the clouds. And why am I doing that? Because everything else is still. Nothing else is moving. So I'm composing the clouds. And now I'm done. The photograph is over. I'm finished. There's no back of the camera to look at. This is 1983. This is film. This is analog. You have to carry your mistakes and your thoughts in your head. You never see your work. But I knew when I put the curtain back that I wasn't finished. Now I'm not looking at the clouds or the cathedral, the Kremlin, the museum, the window frame. I'm not even looking at the pears. I'm looking at the curtain and I'm not even looking at it. I'm only looking at the satin hem of the curtain. I'm waiting for a breeze to lift the curtain into the room and into the composition and into the viewfinder. I'm staring at the bottom of the viewfinder because I want the hem there to give life to the bottom of the photograph so that from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, the photograph has a life. This is a photograph that I believe is in conversation with itself. It was named one of the 50 greatest photographs ever made at National Geographic. And there's two things to say about that. One, it was made on a day off. Two, it took 12 hours to make. But there's a third, subtler thing. And that is, I believe that the photograph is speaking to itself. The pear in the foreground is speaking to the spire, the cupola on the cathedral. Do people see that? They do not. They feel it. "6 a.m. I sense the potential, make a Polaroid, and decide to devote my day to this scene. I take away the curtain. Buses arrive. I make my first mistake, turning a horizontal into a vertical. I make my second mistake, but I'm after something that makes the picture feel right to me, a horizontal line. I use that line to block out the pavement, a key move, but simultaneously, I make another significant mistake. I use the wrong lens. I solve that by backing the camera up, composing on the clouds, and the photograph is over. Or is it? "50 years after I made the photograph, it was written up in the New York Times, and it was called the famous photograph Sam Abell made. I would just add to that, the famous photograph that Sam Abell made on a day off. In my life as a photographer, there have not been days off. Photography was not a job. It wasn't even a career. It was a way of being, and it still is. I stopped working at National Geographic 20 years ago this month. It might have been this week, might have been this day. So maybe we should celebrate that. Let's do it by saying that I'm the same photographer today as I was in '83, practically when I was 13. This is a photograph of a jigsaw puzzle, the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of Jackson Pollock's drip painting, Confluence number 10 from the Buffalo, New York Art Museum. I've given it to my wife as a Christmas present. What stops me on this day as I pass by her workroom, what stops me is that shape. I'm stopped by structure. Structure stops me. And this structure is practically a 35 millimeter viewfinder or the shape of a 35 millimeter slide. This is the shape more than any other that's defined my life. So it stops me. I like that shape. I make this picture. A day later, I come back, more of the puzzle's been filled in, and I drop down to try to include our modest backyard in Virginia. Why not? Why not deepen the photograph? But our backyard is pretty ordinary. There's no Kremlin, no cathedral, no red square, no spires, no clouds. Nevertheless, I like this. And I come back the next day and refine the composition. What does refine mean? It means I'm composing the elements, the fence, the pear tree, the walnut trees on the left. I'm composing it as well as I can. My dad taught me to make the best photograph that I could each time that I addressed the world, each time that I brought the camera to my eye. Make the best photograph that you can. And I have done that, but here's the problem. The world is not cooperating. The world is bland. By that, I mean the atmosphere. But it wasn't on the fourth day. On the fourth day, the world met me halfway. Fog arrived and gave an atmospheric glow to the back layer. And now the whole photograph is alive. Now I have the equivalent of that curtain in my hotel room in Moscow. Am I working for National Geographic? I am not. I'm a citizen photographer, but I have the same sensibility, the same practice of photography that I had when I was a professional and doing work for mighty National Geographic. There is the first picture, and 4 days later, the best picture. Compose the picture, Sammy, and wait. Photograph on the left is famous. Published worldwide many times, been on the cover of books, magazines. Photograph on the right is unknown, except to me and now you. They are the same photograph. During the pandemic, I photographed my backyard. This is a tea house that I made or commissioned to have made after I did a one-day fashion shoot. One day, I made enough money to pay the carpenter to work for 3 years painstakingly on this tea house. What's wrong with this photograph? You may be asking yourself. Is he about to tell us something is wrong with it? Yes, he is. He's about to tell you that 5 things are wrong with it. This is the picture I looked at on the back of my camera. And what did I see? I saw mistakes. For one thing, the photograph was crooked. In my aesthetic and in my tea house, things have to be straight and regular. Verticals have to be vertical. Horizontals have to be horizontal. Frames have to be true. And this one isn't. And so the first thing I did was square the picture up. And now the tree has its just, honest, authentic poetry. Because the tea house is square and strongly horizontal, strong unto itself. It's a true frame. The tree, the pear tree, can float as its own poem in a picture frame. But I also don't like the left-hand side of the picture. It just seems gawky and awkward, especially the rafter beams that you see. they could be tighter and truer. And now they are. And here comes something important, and that is the relationship of the front layer, the front post, to the post of the fence that's behind it. That's gawky and awkward, and to my eye, very uncomfortable. And so I'm going to bury that post and square the post up. I'm going to bury the post of the fence. A small but critical move. And here's a tiny move. The tree and the post behind it on the left could be better. And so I'm going to make that micro correction. And there's one more, the fifth one. An important part of the tea house is the excellence of the carpentry that the carpenter took 3 years to build. I want to honor his work. And so I include more of his fine work. How it started, how it ended. First, best. As I've already said several times, my dad taught me that photographs are built. But the world needs to meet you halfway, and it's not happening. The reason that it's not happening right now is the sun is behind a cloud. And in my life as a photographer, I needed things to happen. A strong composition wasn't enough if there wasn't light. And if there was light, was there a moment? Was there an expression? Was there a gesture that would take the photograph to another level? And right now, what I need is for the sun to come out. I'm holding on to this couple, talking to them, persuading them to wait, because I need that sun to come out. This photograph is unpublishable, and this one is. And so when people look at this photograph, they see the outback of Australia in one photograph and the life that's lived in the outback of Australia. They see, I'm sure, the two figures. They see the beef in the back of the truck from the just slaughtered cow. They see the sky. They see the truck. They see the totality of the scene. But I think that they don't see how the photograph has been built, but it has been. Set aside the personality of this cowboy and just look at the shape of his head and hat. Observe that his head and hat are above the horizon line. Concentrate on that shape and this shape and her shape and the shape of the truck. Shape upon shape upon shape upon shape, building a feeling. A feeling of what? A feeling of photographic power. Photographs are built. Do people see that? They do not. They feel it. First, best. The world met me halfway, and when it did, I was ready. Compose the picture, Sammy, and wait for the rocket, for the doryman, for the train, for the sun, for the curtain. I was stopped by these fish, and I liked the relationship of them. They were in a large tank at a farmer's market in Japan. And I liked the way you could see through the glass and through the water. But this is a bad composition because the fish are horizontal. I recomposed the picture and I waited. The clouds are important, and so is the tree. So is the pavement. They are not the subject of the picture. They're everything else. And if there's one thing that distinguishes my photography is that I had the subject, yes, and everything else. And the way you get everything else is to start at the back of the composition, the back layer, the clouds. The fish swim in to your photograph. And when they do, you're ready. Staying on the theme of fish and Japan and water, I am at a temple in the mountains of Japan by myself, and I'm stopped, not so much by the fish and the water and the leaves. I've seen other ponds like this in other temples. It's not an uncommon sight. These are classic elements of a Japanese temple pool. Something catches my attention. It's that string. I think that it's a design project done by an artist at the temple. It looks designed, but the truth is, in Japan, almost everything looks that way. It's why it's my favorite country on earth and most interesting to me culture, because they do things like this. I'm wrong about that. I later learned this is not a design project. It's a defensive installation of string suspended over the pool to keep birds of prey like herons from eating the fish. So it's a bird discouragement design, not an art design. But the thing is, as I said, in Japan, they almost intuitively design for art when they're designing for function. So I'm struck by that. It seems very Japanese. Not only the pond, the fish, the leaves, but also the string. And it's right about here that I get the idea, because of who I am as a person, an artist and a photographer, that what I want is a photograph of the water, the fish, the string, and the leaves, and nothing touching. All of the elements separated. And this is pretty close, but there aren't any leaves. And this is very, very close. There are leaves, fish, string, water. It is touching, yes, but most bothersome is that cluster of string and leaves in the upper right-hand corner. So I make a more concentrated composition, excluding those leaves and string in the upper right-hand corner. And now I'm waiting. I'm stalking the fish. And I get the photograph that I wanted 40 minutes earlier. 40 minutes have gone by, about 20 of which have been devoted to me wanting a photograph in which the fish, string, and leaves are all present, but not touching. Compose the picture, Sammy, and wait. How it started, how it ended. First, best. During the pandemic, I stayed home like almost everyone did. I sequestered. This is in our backyard in Virginia, a rare, significant snowfall in the middle of the winter in January of this year. It was rare because it was a heavy snowfall, and it was also very rare because it was a clinging, icy snowfall that brought down power lines and knocked out power in our house for 6 days. But this is the beginning. All of that hardship is ahead of us. What's in front of me this day is beauty. This is my palette. These are my graphics. This is the depth I like. It's the color I like. It's the design I liked. All because my first love, as I said, was and still is black and white. And this is a black and white. This is a color photograph in black and white. I've gotten a step ladder and I'm above the clothesline. And I'm making a connection between the clothesline, the fence, the landscape, and the sky. There are things that matter, that give life, to return to that theme of what gives life to a photograph. Here's a couple of things that give life to this photograph. Number one, the clothesline. I've photographed clotheslines all around the world for decades. I find them eloquent, human, suggestive of life. The fence describes the Ohio in my eye that's always with me. The optimistic, dynamic, level line of the horizon. The open gate matters as a poetic detail. And so does the Katsura tree, the single tree. Together, the three are the elements that give this photograph its life. But I'm doing something that is, I might say, or you might say, distinctively me, and that is I'm intensely microcomposing 2 parts of this photograph. They are the junction points where the clothesline meet the fence. They are exactingly close, but do not touch, so that the front layer steps forward from the middle layer and the middle layer from the back layer. The reason I stress no touching is to separate layers. I separate layers to create depth in a photograph. So yes, there's a vast amount of landscape here, a world of snow and trees and fences and clotheslines. And I'm down to looking at an almost microscopic separation between the clothesline and the fence. It matters to me. And when I have it locked in, a wonderful tiny thing happens that gives this picture an extra jolt of life. The tree, the Katsura tree in the middle, I'm looking at. And into it, a bird flies, a black bird called a junko. And it sits on a tree, framed by the canopy of a bent over branch above it, and stares at me for one frame, for one click of the camera. I've been working on the picture for 5 minutes. I've got it locked in. The bird arrives, looks at me, and leaves. Do people see it? They do not. But they might feel it, and I definitely see it. It's all I look at. Where did that picture come from? Photographs come from who we are. I made this photograph 10 years ago in a back alley of Taos, New Mexico. No one else would take this picture. Why did I do it? Because I like the relationship of the clothesline-like chain and the sign to the background. That chain and that sign woke this picture up, gave it its small life, because I waited for the wind to lift the metal sign and give it a life, just like I waited for the curtain in Moscow to enter the photograph and give it life. Is it a great photograph? It is not. But it's connected to the best photograph I've made this year, the one of the clothesline in the snow. They are the same photograph, separated only in time, united by who stood and saw them, and composed and waited for the world to meet me more than halfway. In Havana, I was with a group of photographers. It was a photo tour, a workshop led by me. We'd been out for a couple of hours in the morning, and now we were very, very close to our little hotel on this street. We were maybe 50 feet from our hotel, and we are tired, we are happy, and we are dying for coffee. And we are 50 feet from the hotel when I see this scene. And it is not, I know, great, but it's something. And I don't wait for something to be great. That is, be great like the train coming off the tracks in Iowa. That doesn't happen. Things don't just show up. What you get is a fragment of potential, something that stops you, something that says to you, this could amount to something. And what do I do when I see a scene like this? It's really not going to get off the ground by itself. I compose and I wait. What do I compose on? This will surprise you. I compose on that plumbing fixture in the lower right-hand corner. I do it for two reasons. One, it's very characteristic of Cuba. All of Cuba is jury-rigged. This says Cuba, not Switzerland, not Denmark, not Germany, not Norway, not Sweden, probably not the United States. No, it distinctly says Havana, jury-rigged Havana. There's another reason I put it in the lower right-hand corner. If something happens, if this scene develops, then I will want always to be able to just look in that corner to lock back into this composition. So it's a detail, but my photographs are filled with those details that I try to use to help me make a photograph if in case a photograph developed. This is something, it's not nothing. And like my dad said, make the most, do the best with each situation you raise your camera at. If you see potential, honor it by finishing the photograph and then wait. I was standing with a woman, a photographer, a friend of mine. She too wanted coffee. She too was tired. She too was happy, but she was hanging out with me because I'm the teacher. She said, Sam, someone's coming. Someone of interest is coming. I looked to my left. It was a priest of the Santeria religion. You cannot photograph these men or women who are dressed all in white. It would be a great offense to them if you were on the same sidewalk and raised your camera and confronted them with the camera face to face. But this is different. This is, I have a claim on the intellectual property of this composition. I'm stalking no one. I'm confronting no one. I'm stealing nothing. This man is entering my space, and it is rich and beautiful and strong and serendipitous, and I am ready. Ready means what? I've got the composition, the focus, and the exposure. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm only now waiting for the moment. And what happens? Some turkey walks in front of me, shockingly appears in my composition, right when the man is stepping into the critical space where this photograph will take place or not. I reach out with my left hand and almost touch this man on the shoulder to urge him to move along. But he sees two photographers photographing something and he stops. And just as I reach for him, he moves on and I step back. But now I've lost the integrity of my camera in my hands. I've lost the composition just when it's about to happen, or maybe is happening. I regather myself instantaneously. The man stops, displays the umbrella in a beautiful way. He's closing it. He's reaching for the little clasp that would allow that. She hears him and stands up. I am locked into, because it was so fast, so hard to get back to this composition, I locked it on that plumbing fixture on the right. I am locked in on that. That's what it was there for. First, best. The woman beside me made the same photograph. In my estimation, it's fractionally, almost microscopically better than mine, just because she was fractionally to the left of me. She sent me a letter a year or so ago and said, Sam, I have something to tell you. I entered this photograph in a worldwide photography competition, and it won grand prize. I have misgivings about that because you were the one that stopped. You are the one that said there is potential here. You were the one that talked about the plumbing fixture. I think of this as your photograph, Sam. And I said to her, Carol, this is our photograph. Yes, I did all those things, but you were the one who saw the man coming. You were the one that told me a person of interest is about to enter the composition. You stayed with it. You heard what I said. You made the picture. This is joint, Carol. We both own this photograph. Let's share it and celebrate together. And we did. Can I implant this in your minds today? Setting first. Montana sky before Montana cowboys. I wanted to photograph this man very much, but I didn't have the nerve to ask him. I didn't want to ask him. I wanted to get him in his life. He's a ferryman off the coast of Maine. He's been the pilot of the ferry that I've used to come out to an island, an hour and a half off the coast, Monhegan Island, Maine. I'm with 12 photographers who are dozing and bored, and I say, photographers, we're coming to shore. Things are going to happen. Wake up to situations. Taking my own advice, I followed this man. But this is like the first cowboy picture. Chaos, nothing composed, no great light. But something's going to happen. He's going to throw that rope to the woman that's standing beside me. I quickly realized that this setting does not work. It's completely destructive. Yes, he's good. Yes, he's there. Yes, I wanted to photograph him. Yes, he's about to do something, but I need a setting to go along with the portrait. And the setting that I chose was the ocean. Clean, strong, uniform. People think that this is a photograph of a man throwing a rope to a woman. I think of it as a portrait of the sea with something on top of it. And that something is the rope. Setting first, subject second. How it started, how it ended. I'm in the outback of Australia and I will never be back here. I'm in the Great Sandy Desert. I'm with Aborigines. And with their cooperation and friendship, they've agreed to let me go on a hunt the next morning. I say to them, thank you, but could I ask for a favor? What? I'd like the hunt to come off at dawn or sunset for the quality of light, because the quality of light in the desert, the great sandy desert of Australia, at any other time other than dawn or sunset is cruelly destructive, unworkable, unbearable. And they agree the hunt will come off at dawn. The hunt came off at noon. Not only that, I'm in the car with the hunter, my friend Mark Mora. I think we're going to stalk maybe a kangaroo or a wallaby or a big bird or something. I don't know what we're going to do. They just agreed to take me on a hunt at dawn, and now it's noon, and Mark sees something, and he gets his rifle and he shoots a bush turkey from about 300 feet away, a bush turkey I never saw, one of the loudest sounds of my life, and the hunt is over. And it's noon. And we're going to go back to the village, and I'm never going to come back. Mark retrieves the bird and starts dismembering it, starts tearing out its feathers and wings. No reason to bring the whole bird back. And in a sickening feeling, I think this is over. And I have no photographs. And suddenly I have to go from a documentary photojournalist basically to a portrait photographer. What I look for is a back layer, a setting that I could base a picture on. I see that there's only one, it's the grass. The grass is expressive of Australia and of the great sandy desert. It's beautiful grass. I get on top of my car and I make this picture to remind myself in the future, today, tonight, now, how destructive it was, how the world was not meeting me halfway. The world was going in the opposite direction, the wrong direction. And I say, Mark, just stand there. And I make this photograph. People see an Aborigine holding a bird. I see a portrait of grass that someone is standing on. This is a picture of grass, just like the last picture was a picture of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Maine. Something was on it, a rope, and something's on this grass, a man holding a bird. Setting first, subject second. Out of that destructive scene, that paralyzingly wrong scene, that unworkable light, came the lead picture of grass. The first essay, photographic essay, that I'm going to show you is on the subject of canoeing. It was important for me to do this assignment at National Geographic. It was a book called Still Waters, White Waters, not a book I recommend to you, but a book that I devoted myself to for 14 months. It was as deeply devoted as any project that I ever did. I had a special feeling about the poetics of canoeing and the poetics of photography. And I was going to be the one who united these two subjects. I, above all, was the right photographer for this assignment. It cost me dearly. Doing this assignment kept me from being a staff photographer at National Geographic for 15 years. It was a setback to my career, but I demanded to do it. And that was not popular at the time, but it was the right decision for me as an artist, as a poet, and as a photographer, and as a person. I took many, many thousands of rolls of film in those 14 months. I've distilled it to about 6 or 8 photographs. Here is that group. I would like for you just to get the poetics of this, but this is kind of a workshop that we're having tonight. So I will just say to you that I saw the setting first. This is a still water section of Okefenokee Swamp, which has the most reflective water on Earth. It's 99% reflectivity. So what you're looking at is the reflection of a cypress forest on a stormy day with a cloud filling the circle that the reflection of the cypress tree creates. I canoed right through that and watched myself do it. And I said, there is a photograph. I circled well back, aimed the canoe for the same spot, and let it glide into the composition. This is the rope. This is the man holding the Aborigine holding the bird in Australia, setting first, subject second. But this sets the tone. What goes into a poetic photographic essay? Poetic photographs, poetic feelings, poetic aspirations, and a ton of suggestiveness, where you create mystery, allure, curiosity, mood, and a minimum of facts. A minimum of answers. What does this have to do with canoeing? Nothing. Everything. That's 14 months of work, highly devoted, deeply devoted work, trying to articulate or bring together the poetics of canoeing, which means basically the poetics of life on Earth, and photography, the poetic potential of photography. So at this point in my life, I'm not so interested in telling stories. I'm interested in creating mood and asking questions, posing questions. Questions are more interesting than answers. Suggestiveness is more interesting to me than explicitness. The other poetic photographic essay that I have for you is on the subject of Japan. Canoeing was not a place, it was sort of a state of mind, but I think that Japan is a state of mind as well. I'm ending on this photograph because it is the cover photograph for my full life, full career retrospective, which is coming out next September. Only one photograph can be on the cover of the book, and it has to be expressive not only of my photography, but of me, my sensibility, my thoughts about composition, color, character. It has to invoke my idea that photography is capable of poetic power. I was given the title of poet, a poet in residence at National Geographic early in my career. The canoeing pictures gave me that reputation, and I resisted it, almost resented it. I didn't want to be a poet at National Geographic. I wanted to be a dynamic National Geographic photographer. And I thought by being called a poet, I was being pigeonholed. But they were right, and I was wrong to resist it. And now I don't. That's the end of my presentation. If you're set up for questions, I'll be glad to answer those. I don't know if you are or
We
not.
definitely are. And first and foremost, that there isn't a person in this room that wants you to stop talking, and we haven't lost a single person.
Well,
since the beginning of this presentation.
you know,
So-
I don't know where I am on time. I have a lot more to show, but
Well, there can always be a part two. I mean, there's some questions that I kind of want to follow up on and dive into, because you have a lot of reoccurring themes and wonderful things. And I know people want to see more of what you have to do, but let's take a quick moment here. Obviously, you were raised in Northwest Ohio, which doesn't have the most dynamic of horizon lines, but the horizon line seems to be a reoccurring thing in all of your work and was established very early in your career. Can you explain how kind of it affected how you shoot and how important that horizon line became to you?
yes, I can talk about that. In 7 years into my career at the Geographic, I did the canoeing project, and I thought that it was ruined in publication. The book ended up not being Sam Abell's spiritual journey in a canoe for 14 months. It ended up being sort of having a theme of recreation, and they dragged in a lot of other photographers' work, and my heart was broken, and I took a leave of absence to teach at Ohio University. And my wife, my wife to be, the woman I was to marry, she and I were together, and I wanted to get to know her and her to get to know me outside of the pressure cooker of a geographic assignment. And so we had 3 months together at Ohio U in the winter, a very, very cold winter, coldest winter of the century. And no one knew me, and I had a very light teaching load, but I had driven a Volkswagen bus across the Appalachian Mountains from Washington, D.C. to Ohio U, and the van was full of 7 years of film. And I set up in those 3 months about looking at those 7 years of film with two purposes in mind. I've lost.
Oh no, it's just now we can see you instead of the gray screen. So
Okay.
just us talking.
Are you seeing me right now?
Yep.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, there we are. So 7 years of film in a Volkswagen bus, 3 months to look at it. And I had one of those light tables that had a flat surface and then trays. There were trays. You take a picture from here, put it up on a tray. And I looked through those 7 years of work with one purpose, and that was to find myself. Not National Geographic and not prize-winning photographs or photographs I could make money from, photographs that would enhance my career. I was looking for myself. I didn't even know what that meant. But I knew that if I didn't take time off and look for myself, I would become nothing more and nothing less than a National Geographic photographer. And I thought I was an artist. I didn't talk about it. I didn't even talk about it to myself. But I thought I will lose my way. I will get into the National Geographic reward system, which was powerful, and which I ultimately did 15 years later. But right now, feeling elated by those 14 months and burned by what had happened, wanting to get to know my wife, teaching at Ohio U, I had a chance, maybe a once in a lifetime chance, to find myself in my work. For 3 months, I did that. And at the end, I looked at that light table, and what did I see? Two things: colorlessness. Most of the pictures that I'd selected as ones I loved, ones that felt like me, were on the colorless side. They were gray, black and white, white, shades of black, shades of gray. And I thought, where did that come from? And then I thought it came from those long Northern Ohio winters, gray, everyday gray. Anyone who's lived in the Great Lakes would know that. That is great. That is the color of the Great Lakes, gray. The lakes create it. How could it be otherwise? And the other thing I noticed, it didn't matter what culture I was in or what subject I was photographing, there was me urging the composition to be divided by a horizon line. And then I knew where that had come from. It had come from my childhood, the first 18 years of my life. I was back there recently, and love of that landscape again took me over, but it wasn't in the winter. If I were to go back to that landscape in the winter, I would feel aesthetically at home. This is me. This is my graphic. This is my palette. This is my sense of infinity, which now I would call my sense of eternity. So your aesthetics, who you are aesthetically, comes from some place. It isn't a magic fairy that touches you on the shoulder and says you have an aesthetic. Your aesthetic is what you saw as a child and what you loved as a young adult when you knew that you could love a landscape. We come from somewhere. I'm the son of two teachers. They imposed themselves on me. Ohio did. Literature did. Art did. That's where the horizon line comes from. It comes from a real place, and it resides in me. I call it the echo in my eye of Ohio. So it doesn't matter. In the picture of the woman on the train that's on the cover of my book, she rises head and shoulders above the horizon line, as does the cowboy, as does the doryman. There's a horizon line in that picture.
Oh, it's pretty obvious you are a poet, but I think they should create a new category, the photo laureate, instead of the poet laureate. Let's jump back just quickly to your father was a teacher, and I believe he ran the photo club. And
yes.
It seems you almost question, like, if he even wasn't that, would you have become a photographer, or was it just always somehow in there and fated for you to become a photographer? Was that, the first steps of you really kind of finding your love for photography?
It was not fated for me to be a photographer. It was fated for me to be a writer or a teacher. I consider that I am a writer who photographs. And I'm a teacher who photographs. I want to say that I know that I'm intuitively a photographer because I was intuitively and profoundly not a musician. My parents gave me a cello at the same time they gave me a camera. I was an abject failure. I didn't understand notes, notation. I didn't have a feeling for rhythm, melody, tune, notes. The vocabulary of music was a complete foreign language to me. And I was very sorry about that because I love listening to music. I love being moved by music. But when I picked up a camera, I saw space, I saw light, I understood texture, I understood volume of space. I understood the power of separation of elements. Everything. I understood everything intuitively about photography. I'm not a painter. I can't sketch or draw. I can't sculpt. So I would not say I'm a poly artist or anything like that. I can write. When Truman Capote said, I knew from a young age I could throw words into the air and they'd come down in the right place. Well, I feel that about words. And so I felt that writing was my destiny. But in a choice, and I had choices in my career, between being a writer or an editor, being a newspaperman, being a editorial writer for magazines, for being a teller of stories, a writer of stories. I had those choices. And each time I had the choice, I chose photography. It was more fun. It was more physical. I thought it was more soulful. It was more accessible. It was public and not private. It was extroversion rather than introversion. I took out my intensity, my artistic intensity, in a physical way. I didn't take it out, as I do when I write, on myself.
Well, I have to say, you may now become a musician, but you just taught us a master class in composition, without a doubt. And you say in your past that it was your father that taught you how to take a picture, but it was actually your mother who taught you what to photograph.
Yes.
And what was that she gave you that taught you, what to photograph?
The Pears picture is almost 100% tribute to my mother, to our house, to her taste, to her style. She made handmade curtains for every window in our house, for example, just as a starting point. But our house had antiques in it because of her, had those curtains because of her. Views were framed because of her. We had a garden because of her. And we had, my brother and I, who was 3 years older than me, I would just say, I've tried to describe her influence in the most complimentary but fair way that I can. And that is, I describe her influence on me as exacting. The rigorous compositions, separating the clothesline from the fence, separating all of the elements in the gondola picture. Somehow her exactingness became my exactingness. My dad didn't have that. My dad was easygoing, and when my mom died, all of that went away.
There's a certain thing that I love about your photography that it really doesn't sort of exist today, and in your world, Photoshop sort of doesn't exist, and you purposely leave in mistakes where nowadays we would pull out elements from a photo, and certainly there's certain National Geographic photographers that were brought up for taking out certain things in photos to make it more pretty, but you leave them in there purposely for a reason. Can you explain why you do that? And I think it's beautiful, and it needs that explanation.
Well, I hope I say what you remember, but I cropped freely, and I dodged and burned, and I liked darkroom magic as a boy and as a young man. But at college, I was exposed to the work of Cartier-Bresson, and a friend of mine who was more sophisticated in photography and more intelligent, more thoughtful than I, he said, Sam, these pictures that we like are all full frame. Well, that was news to me. Full frame, what does that mean? And my friend Bill said, Bresson doesn't crop. These are all, as he demands of himself that he see it in the viewfinder. Then when he looks through the camera, he takes that to be his discipline and his theater. And he's creating these compositions of settings and moments all in his eye, and not afterwards. And I don't think I cropped a picture. That was 50 years ago. And if I've cropped a picture, I apologize, because I held that to be the serious. And I wanted to be serious about photography. I wanted to if there was something serious about it, that I wanted to know about it, learn about it, and adopt it and make it mine. And so full frame comes from that. I also, so it's a discipline. And sometimes I think it's the only discipline in my life, honestly. And
There's one
I
photo.
and I if I fail, I don't crop out the mistake and say, see, I didn't fail. I tell myself to do better next time, to do it better next time. And doing it better means dealing with the world that you have been given, not idealizing it, not overcomposing or perfecting it. I think I leave mistakes in because they're honest to life. And I would say, I have a picture taken on the coast of Maine with a host of seagulls in it and two men. And one of the seagulls is wrong. It's only half in the corner of the picture, upper left-hand side of this picture. It is the first thing that you would crop out. It is the first thing that you would airbrush out without question. It offends me. It's wrong. But I show that picture to prove that every other seagull is right. And all of them are. But that little imperfection sends the signal, these seagulls have not been created in Photoshop. Otherwise, that half seagull in the corner would be gone. I don't know. One of the things, to get to the core of it, when I look at a photograph, I want to know it's valid. I want to know that it happened in the world. And the photographer had the strength of seeing and the discipline and the technique to nail it. And nailing it afterwards in Photoshop is like not only boring, it's lying. And so I'm disinterested in that. Honest, valid photographs are hard to make. And I want to salute the photographer that does it. So, I mean, I ask people, have you worked on this? No, I haven't. Well, good on you, as they say in Australia. Now we can talk about it.
One of the things I thought was so beneficial tonight was you showing the process it took to get to the photo. And it seems like you take this endless amount of time to show that the photo took no time. And there's such beauty in that. But in this day and age where suddenly all these photographers are expected to, with this digital age of, you can pull the photo and send it Wi-Fi instantly to the editor and stuff like that. What advice do you have for photographers now that sometimes may not have that time to build it, or should they take a stand and what if it's a different age? What kind of advice do you have for the modern photographer?
Well, to make a living, to be in the world of photography, you have to subscribe to and be obedient to the gestalt of the day of your career of clients, that the clients are real. You have to live in that world. I want to stress this right at the end, that you might have to have 2 tracks in your photographic life. I had 2 tracks in my career. Everyone thought track 1 was enough. National Geographic photographer. You can dine out on that forever in photography. It's one of the summits, one of the many summits of photography. And I stood on that summit. And why what more do you need? Well, I will tell you what the other thing I needed was I needed to stand on the summit of art. That, and not the art world, but me, live up to my belief that I was an artist. And in order to do that at National Geographic, I just had to have those two states of mind, try to honor what Geographic wanted in a big way, and I did. But never lose track of honoring my own ideals of being an artist. Now that's all I have to think about. So lucky me. And by the way, I've got to I'm doing this book, which is my final statement. I don't need another statement beside this book. I feel young at heart, young in photography, and young physically, but I'm 77. And so I'm not going to live forever. I'm not going to work forever, but I'm the same person I was when I was 13. And this book is about that. It's about a span of time. And one of the things I say in the tiny essay that I write at the beginning of the book is that I look at my work to see what's there. And one of the things that's there is constancy. I have been myself for 50 years in photography. And maybe I was lucky. I think I was. But today, if you've got to honor the workplace you're in. If you want something more from photography, you've got to do it on your own. And I will just tell you that full frame photography, honest, what I would call honest, authentic documentary photography, the world as it is, seen by you, is deeply pleasurable to engage in. If I spend 40 minutes on a photograph, that is not 40 minutes of work. That's 40 minutes of devoted thinking about how I can get this picture to where I think it can get, because I've been stopped by potential. And those 40 minutes or 20 minutes or 4 days or 12 hours are me being a photographer in the world. And I never talk, but I hope I convey the pleasure of that process, the pleasure of solving the problem. And that means certain things to me, you know.
Yeah.
The horseman has to be above the horizon.
There was something that you had said a while ago, that your first Nat Geo job, the very first one you went out and shot, really set the groundwork for the themes that you shoot and continued to shoot throughout your career. And there was a point where you described one of those themes, and what you shoot for is beauty. And you took a moment and you said that you didn't want to apologize for shooting beauty, and that you were motivated by photographers that were social documentarians that went out and shot, you know, about social and racial and political and economic justice things. And you ended up by saying that you felt beauty was endangered and dying a quiet death. And that hit me in a really hard way. And it seems no more apropos than in this world we're living right now, in the current political climates, and in dwindling resources, and in the racial tensions that we have in the politics. How do you revisit that statement now in your career?
Yeah, I would say the same way. No one is more stricken by social injustice and racial injustice and political ignorance as much as I am inside, in my heart and in my soul. I'm in an apartment building in Charlottesville, Virginia, and right below me, where I can see, a woman was killed as a zombie driving a truck through a demonstration. I can look out this window and see the street that's dedicated to her. So what happened to January 6th was not a surprise to people that live in Charlottesville, Virginia. We saw it here. It's right there, right down on the street. My early photography was concerned with that. The photographers that I most admire are and were concerned with that. Eugene Richards comes to my mind, a colleague of mine. Did I go down that road? I did not. Is it less of a road, the road that I went down? No, it's a different road. I had something, still have something to give to the world. And it's a It's not beauty. It's an original, new, I believe, fresh, valid, and important idea about beauty. It mingles who I am with philosophic ideas of the Japanese called wabi-sabi, that there's beauty in decay, there's beauty in death, there's beauty in decline. That is not a Hallmark card, and it's not National Geographic. It's me. And so my photography is a response to what I think is beautiful. But synonyms for beauty would not be pretty or sentimental. They would be thoughtful, the word thoughtful. They would be the word solemn. They would be the word introspective. They would be the phrase thought-provoking. So it's not sunsets, it's not flowers, it's not Valentine's, and it's not easy. It's a kind of hard beauty, stern at times, and difficult, I would say. What does a fallen tree have to do? How can the fallen tree in Alaska be beautiful? A derelict tree on a barren delta. But to my eye, there was a depth of beauty. I feel that way about the approaching owl. That is the title page of my book. Is the woman on the cover of my book beautiful? No, she's pensive.
There's a follow-up question to that, and having spent such a career in this industry and seeing so many different things, and as artists, as poets, as photographers, we're empathetic, and we're out there, and we feel sometimes a lot harder. We see a lot more. When there's times where you are beaten down or you've seen things that bring you down, how do you pull yourself out? And what advice would you give to photographers that haven't been through that yet, that are going to go through that?
Well, I think that if you're a documentary photographer, you put yourself into life, and life is going to be difficult, hostile at times, dangerous, and yet you want that life. You want to be in life. You don't want to be in a studio. You don't want to be running a business. You have to run a business. You might end up in a studio, and there's photographers that don't want to be in the world, in the real, what I would call the real world. They want to be in a world of their own creation, the studio, in one word. That wasn't for me. And when I entered that world with a camera in my hands, I wanted the world to come at me. And right away, I did things that were hard, that no one would ever choose to do. In Newfoundland, I went on the seal hunt, killing baby seals on the ice for 2 weeks. I crafted something of very stern beauty out of that. It isn't a journalistic picture. I took those, but I'm not interested in that. I was interested in the eternity of what was going on. And the contrast between two eternities, the eternal beauty of the North Atlantic, the ice, and the eternity of death of the seals. So I as I say, I'm a writer who photographs. That's not for everyone. Photographers don't write. They don't. And one of the reasons they're photographers is they found writing difficult. I saw that at National Geographic. They could write enough, but they didn't know photographer there thought of himself or herself as a writer. I'm straying off your question here. I think I teach a couple of things in my workshops. One is finding yourself in your work, finding yourself in your photography, basically finding a way to do what I did at Ohio U in 1977, take time off to find yourself in your work, not what your client wants, not what's going to make you money, not what's going to get you a promotion or a blue ribbon, but yourself, your sensibility, your palette, your horizon line, whatever it is. Ernst Haas told me, I find a figure eight in my photography. I'm a romantic, I love music, and I find this recurring figure eight in my work. And I thought, wow, you can find your shape in your work. And it was a couple of years later that I found the horizon line. Ernst Haas does not care, did not care, did not seek, see, find a thing about horizon lines. That photograph of the rope being tossed is an Ernst Haas photograph. It belongs in his portfolio. And for that reason, even though it's a spectacular picture of a rope being thrown and is wonderful to talk about setting first and all that, I'm not publishing that in my 50-year book, in my retrospective. And the reason is, it's not me, it's Ernst Haas. It's not my aesthetic. It's my skill, not enough.
I had a question that just back to sort of your method. I mean, what's amazing is that people usually move or chase a photo. They're always looking for what's about to happen, where you really broke it down of finding your frame and letting everything else somehow magically happen in that shot. And you have this mantra of composing your photos and the micro compositions and internal framing, and the layering. And every time you do lift that camera, that's what you're thinking about. What is it that really makes that photo work in your mind and really sets it up? Because what I'm curious about is you take that time, and it's that time that you take to say it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to sit here. But are you a patient man, or do you have to tell yourself to take that extra time, or is it something that's inherent in you, like, I'm okay taking this time, or you have to constantly remind yourself, no, take the time, take the mistakes, it's okay, reformat this. And when you're saying mistake, it would only be a mistake if you didn't continue. If you stopped there and went home and said, oh, look at that, I never pushed further.
So when I learned that compose and wait from my dad, and I absorbed it, and I saw that it paid off, like at the train station picture. But I was just really gathering everything that I could about photography from these magazines, from my dad, and from my own photography, looking at it. And it was a cornucopia of ideas and techniques and styles. It was black and white, there was color, big camera, small camera. And that was all interesting to me. And I took a bite out of every fruit in that cornucopia. But black and white tasted the best to me. And I like 35 millimeter more than 2 1/4. And I gradually honed myself into being the fundamental photographer. But in Newfoundland, on my first assignment, I was failing. And I knew that I was failing. And I knew if I failed, I would lose my way in this career. I probably wouldn't get a second chance. So I couldn't fail, but I was failing. And I remembered what my dad told me: compose the picture, Sammy, and wait. And my thought was, what I'm doing is not working. Maybe I should return to that. And I will tell you and everyone else that I am not a patient person. That was definitely true then, partially true now. I'm more patient now than I was, just because I'm older. But I've also, hear me out on this. I tried it in Newfoundland, and it worked. It was better than what I was doing, chasing the subject. There is one brilliant reason, glowing and shining reason, why I became a compose and wait photographer. One word, and the word is results. I got more results doing this than anything else. Does it work all the time? It does not. There is no way, there's no way that will give you results all the time unless you're in a studio. If you want results 100% of the time, get a studio, hire models, buy lights, get backdrops, control it all. In the real world, I mean, in the world I chose to work in, the world outside the studio, you control almost nothing. And so one of the things you have control over is waiting. So when I teach photography, I say, allow yourself to be stopped. Listen to your sense of, listen to yourself. Say, I like that color, or I like that design, that graphic, that space, this space. I like this, what's in front of me. No one, by the way, will ask you to do that except me. You'll never hear someone else say, listen to yourself, respond aesthetically to what's in front of you. But I push that. I push, listen to yourself and stop. And when your sensibility says stop, stop. And bring the camera to your eye and make a picture. That's you. It's not an editor. It's not a boss. It's not for money. It's you listening to yourself say stop. And then wait. See what happens. Inside you, you might get closer, further back, you might make changes. But the world will definitely change. It doesn't always change for the better, but it's an interesting way to be in life. Almost everyone who tries it says, you know, things happen. I didn't show you, I did not show you like the best. Yes, I did. But I have many, many, many more examples of something happening. And I would call that, in a word, results. In other words, it's not an entirely aesthetic experience. Mainly is for me now. Yeah. But in my career at National Geographic, I had to have results. My way of getting it was compose and wait. So it's not theory and it's not philosophy.
Yeah.
It's a way to generate results.
I think some of the words that I'm going to come away with tonight is taking a photograph, making a photograph, and potential. Seeing the potential, and there's such incredible things. I know we've taken you so long into this. I want to thank you for your time. I know we're going to get a couple last questions here. I know Deb's probably got a great question, and Nivea's got a great question. Then I always have a final question that I like to ask all of our photographers. So Deb, I'm sure you have a biting at the chomp, biting at the bit, as they say, to ask a question.
I think that you mentioned that what you'll take away. I think that I will take away the what you say was photographs are built, you compose the picture and wait for it to come alive. I like the saying come alive. That's like that will be quoted on our Twitter feed tomorrow. But I just wanted to say, I don't really have any questions for you, Sam. I just want to say that you are an absolutely mesmerizing speaker. And I know I'm speaking for everyone who's still listening to this, and so generous of spirit. And we just really appreciate you coming to speak with us tonight.
I'm very happy to do it. My parents were teachers. My only brother is a teacher. My grandparents were teachers. It comes to me naturally to, I will just say that my editor of 30 years in making this book, the book of my best work that's coming out next fall, the subject of writing came up, and she said, Sam, you can write, and when you write, you teach, and that's good. And you've done books, you've done those books. But in this book, let the music of the photographs be the subject. So that will be a first for me, a book minus my writing and minus my stories and minus my lessons and minus my evangelism, you know. So thank you for saying that. That's a compliment. And sometime, maybe in the years to come, I'm going to do a book called The Education of a Photographer. And that'll be words and stories and so forth. So thank you, Deb. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And I'm hoping that we can do a follow-up with you, and the follow-up be when you release your book, so we can do a book
Yes.
signing.
Yeah,
and
let's
talk
do
about the
that
book.
then. That would be
Yeah,
And
fun.
that's the one we would love to do. Lydia, do you have a question for?
Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, I really learned a lot just listening to you, and I really appreciated you taking us through your process of different pictures, and showing your mistakes and then the final photo. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for that. Definitely gonna keep that in the back of my mind when I'm photographing. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I believe in process, and I believe in learning from mistakes. And as a boy, I did not like to see somebody's greatest hits. I wanted to see their process.
I think we learn from those mistakes and the process more than we
Yeah.
ever will the successes. And one of the questions that I always end with is on the most personal level and what it means to you, not the definition of it. What is photography?
It's thought. A photograph is thought revealed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time. I know everybody's going to be asking, can they watch this again, because they want to. They're like, I have to see that again and again. It was so inspiring. And there were so many wonderful comments of people being inspired here and not wanting it to end. And they're like, I can't tell you how many comments were like, oh, please don't stop talking. Show us more. We want more. Thank you so much. We never lost a person. From APA, I want to thank all of you. We are here to educate and advocate and elevate the professional photography community. Remember, we have our APA awards, call for entries. You can enter at apanational.com. And next Tuesday, we have Annie Leibovitz live talking about her book, Wonderland, at SVA. SVA, thank you for all you've done and partnering up on this. Deb, thank you so much for always inspiring and pulling great inspirational people that just come with their heart on their sleeve and really share and motivate all of us, because it's a rough time to be a photographer, because there's so many out there and it's a strange world. And when a lot of photographers had to go internalize and not shoot people for a year because of COVID, and they had to reevaluate what they were doing, and we grew stronger as a community, helping each other and being there to support one another. And that's the most important thing you can do, is help educate and support each other and share information. So I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Sam, this has been a wonderful, wonderful, amazing way to end our first series in season of this series. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing your book and talking more with you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you all. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.